Okay, to start off, to make your buttonhole on your bag, the first thing you need to do is get a little scrap of fabric and mark the buttonhole exactly the same length that you need it on your little bag by measuring the button that you are going to use, like we did in the last video. Then you mark it like a capital I, and this is your practice piece, and you need it big enough that you can fold it in half, because when you do a buttonhole, it makes really super tight stitches right together, and if you only use one layer of fabric, it will stuff it in the presser down in the stitch plate, and you'll have a mess. So you use 2 layers of fabric with a capital I marked on it. Then the next thing you need to do is find your buttonhole foot. So your regular presser foot has 2 toes on it like that, and your buttonhole foot has 3 toes on it. So there's a difference. That's the first difference. The second difference is that it has tracks in the bottom of it, so that it will keep the buttonhole straight as you go up and down on the buttonhole. As you go around, because your machine will go down and over and back around, and it keeps it in those tracks and keeps the buttonhole like perfectly straight. So it turns out really nice. So I always practice, number one, to make sure that it's the right length, that I've calculated the buttonhole measurements correctly, and that my button will fit through it. And the second reason is just to make sure we're setting the machine correctly, make sure that we've got everything right. And so then we're gonna line up that little capital I that we made by putting the top part of the capital I in the window. This window is bigger on this presser foot so that you can see what you're doing right underneath the needle. So you line up the capital I up there in the window, and then you line up the middle part of this long part of the I, where it's the actual buttonhole that you're going to split open, like on this middle foot, middle toe. And you're going to line it up right on that toe and keep it lined up on that toe. Then you're going to set your machine. You're going to have to look in your manual, because every machine is very different on buttonholes. So you're going to have to look in your machine and figure out how your machine needs to be set, and if it's computerized or not. Then you're going to start sewing right on the top of that I, and you're just going to guide the machine with the mark right on that middle toe, and watch the needle to make sure it's sewing right on that mark that you did. Then when you see the other side of the I come into the window like that, you may want to take some hand stitches, or you just got to be careful to stop right on that I, end of that I, and then you're going to adjust your machine if you need to adjust it, or if it will do it automatically, you'll need to stop it. Okay, and then you're going to do about a few tacks at the top, and then you're going to adjust your machine again if you need to, or if it's computerized, you just hit the backstitch button or whatever the computerized setting is. Then you're going to back up and do the other part of the buttonhole, and when you get to the other part of the capital I, make sure it's even with the first leg that you did down the side, and then adjust your machine again to do the second tack, and do it about the same amount of stitches as you did on the other end. And then the last one usually is a little really super small straight stitch that almost sews in the same spot that knots off the buttonhole. When you're done, your buttonhole should look like this, and then you're going to cut the threads off on it. And the dark you can see is that marking that I did with that green washable pen, so that will come out when I wash the fabric. Then once you get that done, you're going to put your seam ripper in there, and you're only going to cut halfway, because can you tell if I keep cutting, it's going to cut right through my fabric. Buttonholes are almost always one of the last things you do on your project, so you could make a really nice expensive project and then not be careful and cut the buttonhole right through the fabric and ruin your whole project. So did you notice I only cut halfway, and then I turned it around, and now I'm cutting the other halfway, but instead of pushing it all the way through the buttonhole, I'm going to go like this and cut so I can't cut through the fabric on the other side. If you're not careful and you try to force it, it will cut like right through there and make a big rip in there, because this little part of the seam ripper is a razor blade right down in there. So it's just going to razor blade cut that whole thing. Then when you finish, sometimes you'll get little threads in there. So you're going to come back with your scissors and just cut the threads. Once you've done this practice buttonhole, you should have measured it the same size as the button that you're going to use. And you're going to try the buttonhole and make sure the button slides through it nicely. Now, it shouldn't be really sloppy and be too big for the button, but it should also not be like too tight so that you can't get the button right through. So this one's just the perfect size. It's slipping through just perfectly. Once you do that, you know that you're ready to do the buttonhole on your button bag right there, and you do the exact same process. So let's do it one more time. Here we go. So we're going to line up the long part of the eye on the middle foot, and we're going to do this top part of the eye in the window. And we're going to go faster this time because I've already explained it to you. So we're going to line it up and get it in the center of the window. We're going to set our machine to whatever setting it does to do the buttonhole. And you can kind of bring your needle part way down and make sure it's going to land right in that line. And then you're going to start your buttonhole. Oh my goodness. Pull the thread up in the back. Okay. You're going to follow that eye all the way down. And when you get to the other side of the eye, you're going to stop right in the bottom of the eye. You're going to adjust your machine to do the tack. Then you're going to back up. And can you see how it's going nice and straight? And I am hardly guiding it because it's like right in those tracks. And then it's done the top tack, and now it's going down the side and making a really small stitch that knots the buttonhole so it won't come undone, with the threads won't come undone. Then I'm going to cut the threads off really nice. Notice how I'm laying my scissors flat on the fabric. If I lay my scissors like this, watch what happens. If I lay my scissors like this, my thread now is the height. It's the height of my scissors when I cut it. If I lay it down, it cuts it right off. And then I'm going to cut it off like that. Make sure I get it cut off tight. Then I'm going to take my seam ripper again. Go part way. Turn around, put it right by the tack. Fold it back so I don't cut through it. Cut part way. Halfway, and it's open now. I'm going to clean up any little frayed threads that are coming out of there. And now my buttonhole's done and my button bag's almost done. Now the last thing I'm going to do, notice that's why I want my holes in my button to go vertical, is because that's the way the buttonhole's going. And when you put the button through here, the button is going to slip down to the bottom of that buttonhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my marking pencil while this is closed and go in the center of this buttonhole, estimate the center. That's a math skill, estimating, and estimate the center of that buttonhole and make a little mark in there on the other fabric. And then you're going to open this up because you don't want to sew that closed and sew the button through both of those, or now you don't have a bag. You've got to just sew it to the one side, and you're going to sew a button with a shank just like I showed you on the bookmark. So if you need to review that, go back to the bookmark and watch the sewing the button with the shank on, and you're going to sew a button with a shank on right there, and then you are going to submit it to me on this assignment for buttonholes. Good job. See you, students.